SheerLee here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and this is Mars, our soul day. Sun is 29 degrees Sagittarius, squaring Neptune, about to ingress into Capricorn. Mars is in Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, that squares Venus in Sagittarius. So, something to keep in mind for the Venus Saturn hard aspects that Mars could be severing ties or taking action to defend what is right or defend a standard that is right that is related to the crisis of Venus and Saturn squaring, which is the crisis of values of freedom and boundaries. Venus also rules appearance and Saturn and standards, and Saturn rules structure. So, a strong theme that comes up is how, and I'm trying to phrase myself correctly, everything that does not honor Venus falls apart in a crisis form. I think I talked about the Venus Saturn hard aspects as delay, something is delayed regarding relations that has to do with the structure of society. I got that. One of the people that I remember carrying a Saturn Venus hard aspect, other than myself, is Ksenia Moore. And she was taught in the beginning that Saturn Venus hard aspect was because of something bad that she did in past life. Then she had a past life reading and she was shown how she compromised her standards, and then Saturn was delaying relationships until she was honoring of her own self, particularly on a love language. And then she met her husband and married her current husband. Okay, so that was a change in, and Saturn is also the orthodoxy or the tradition and spirituality that gave, in that case, an astrologer a reading about Venus and Saturn, our aspect, that was downright wrong because that reading was not assisting her in, okay, until she went and got that past life reading, and then she would incorporate past life readings into her teaching and affiliated partners. And by the way, shout out to Ksenia Moore. Okay, um, she's an amazing astrologer that integrates um, various brands, traditional and modern, of astrology with 10 times the knowledge that I could ever have. So, um, so I'm really appreciative of Ksenia Moore. And this is where Venus Saturn, by the way, Saturn can also be teachings, because getting the teaching that her relationships are delayed because she did something wrong plays into the structure of society where the guru would rape children. That's why the relations were delayed. And until learning to honor one's own values, there would not be the even correct teachings, because the structure of society was so dishonoring of women that she didn't even find a good astrology reading for her Venus Saturn hard aspect. And by the way, later around her marriage, she would have, I think, a cooperation with her husband that would also be a new view of Saturn. So Venus Saturn hard aspects are the test of time that delays something of a Venusian because the structure of society has to change. Think about it, before the outer planets, Pluto, Uranus, um, Neptune, then we had Saturn as the outer planet. And now we have a crisis of the structure of society, and in that case, it has to do with religion. And Venus, which is value of freedom, regarding religion, philosophy, and so on. Which religions and philosophies and teachings honor the Venusian? And this is where anything that tries to demote Venus is associated with the falling and dissolving structure that's based upon child ritual abuse. If you think about the humble yourself of the Mormons, that's denoted particularly at women and the feminine. Namely, also gay men would suffer from that if there would be gay men in Mormonism. If there were the gay men in Mormonism. I mean, of course there are, but not outside. Um, but this is where that which doesn't honor Venus, because of old, outdated structures of society, creates a delay, and is particularly a delay in relations. And so, while in the beginning there can be even societal pressure on Venus to adjust her values to the traditional, actually Saturn delays the relation until the structure of society changes. And Venus stands in her standards in the face of that society. Now, what does Venus in Mula Nakshatra Sagittarius want? The freedom, not just the freedom. How should I say that? In Mula Nakshatra, we understand that we cannot compromise not understanding and not being where the decision making process on the resources or the freedom allocation of humanity is. That frightens traditional society. And usually it's kind of like being a centered woman in a crowd of women that has succumbed to the patriarchy and their male counterparts. They would try to demote, they would try to criticize the form, they would try to pretend that the Venus is not knowledgeable, they would try to humble Venus, they will try to compare Venus to other women, they would try to do all the tricks in the book to do everything but something that wouldn't divert the attention from the societal structure that is violating of Venus, that needs to change. and their role in creating and complying with that structure. And this square can be experienced as devoid of the passion that is of a true cohesive union, and dedicated to Venus basically having a delayed union because there is no true cohesion. It's trying to take away from Venus what she actually has, her value that she actually has. In every single trick in the book, because she confronts those who are the Saturns with their own lack of value to offer to the table, their own lack of honoring Venus, their own lack of structure that accommodates that for love that is actually loving. Their own reliance on trying to demote Venus when their human trafficking protocol is basically challenged. Their own reverting to anything and everything that would try to shame Venus for being authentically herself, safe and free, compatible only with a true cohesive union. That the structure of society is basically not allowing by design. Saturn in Pisces reminds us that we have choice regarding the structure of society. And that structure is subjected to change. The sign afterwards is Mars, where the structure does change. The structure of society is completely broken. Those that were reliant on Venus adapting to the structure of society are the ones that find this the most challenging because they can't anymore rely on those silly tricks of deprecation and psychological abuse and religious abuse and spiritual abuse and financial abuse to adjust Venus to their standards, to try to make Venus the image of rather than her authentic self. And this is a growth crisis because Venus, the planet of union, basically basically stands in a delayed union. And while Venus' tendency is to meet people halfway, the crisis, the hard aspects with Saturn, is where she can only do it so much. She can't really go the extra mile, and she shouldn't. And that's why Saturn delays the union, because there isn't a counterpart. The structure of society has to change for there to be a counterpart. And I give the example of Ksenia Moore, where there wasn't even a reading that wasn't blaming the Venus or the woman that has the Saturn Venus hard aspect in being something terrible in the past life to be deserving of not having relationship available in this life. This is also, and here's the topic, this is also where self-deprecation from anything Venusian can result in a harsh crisis. Okay, if I think about, let's say Venus Sun, we are about to have a Venus Sun conjunction in Capricorn, and Venus Sun always being a Me Too term to, and you think about it was the women that were accepting upon themselves things that they shouldn't have, and it's not about blame. It's just like they were self-deprecating. So when somebody was confident and shining and radiant, they had a problem with that. And it was their own internal thing with themselves. But they tried to demote, to say, yes, that woman climbed up the ladder through the pants, ignoring the fact that that woman was raped until she was trafficked, and then began to take power positions to alleviate the rape. And confront the fact that that was not climbing up the ladder through the pants. Rape is not climbing up the ladder to the pants. Okay, so that's a good example from the Me Too on how women themselves, a generation of women, would be looking at, oh, that's the better per se story. And right now, with the Venus hard aspect to Saturn, it's the self-deprecation of both men and women, straight and gay, that have self-deprecated so much that when they see a shiny, confident, radiant person that can acknowledge, whether it's, let's say, their colleagues or their teachers, they have to add an extra layer of humiliation because that was a part of their rights that they're used to, and they can't really, even on a subconscious level, they haven't seen a reality where that's not happening. Okay, think about, there is a lovely song, and I don't remember the name of the artist. It's the lady that sings, everybody loves women, everybody wants women to love themselves, or everybody, talk about women loving themselves until they actually do. And this is the Saturn Venus hard aspect, together with the juxtaposition to the sun. Now, each and every one of us can fall, and we are very likely to fall in both the Saturn and the Venus category of that. Okay? Watch in the coming days when you see a shiny, radiant, confident person speaking up or speaking the truth. And if you have your own internal, wait a second, they're not even that beautiful, or they're not even that, why are they getting that? Actually, like the stuff I had that reading a while ago, where someone say, wait a second, they don't even apply to the beauty standards of the Mormon good girl. Okay, or the upside down triangular shaped face. And I'm not saying those standards are not beautiful. I'm saying like they don't even apply to the um, to those particular standards of beauty. Why do they get like? How come they're so radiant and shiny when other people? Or wait a second, they didn't even study by 1,000 gurus. That right, children? And they don't even have an academic school of this, the certification of that, this, and yet they're so confident in their teaching and so on. Because that is usually the self-deprecation instinct that kicks in, where basically the Venus Saturn is inviting us to acknowledge our value rather than to self-deprecate. And each and every one of us can be on that side of that equation. And you know what? We probably, in one way or another, will. So when in one situation we will be that, wait a second, where did that even come from? Or why from that person? Like, why did they have to try to demote? What the heck is happening with them? Why are they so unconfident? Then in another situation, we might meet ourselves in a place where we were like, oh, okay, wait a second. And if we are applying the Saturn restraint to basically confront ourselves and go within, then we can regain our value of even by the merit of being self-aware and understand that, wait a second, we don't have to, okay? Or if I give the example of, yeah, I'm probably not going to have the knowledge that people that studied all their life astrology had. It doesn't mean, for example, if I talk about Aries, which actually has a lot to do because Aries is actually trining Venus, it doesn't mean, and in the fact, one of my innovations is with Aries, because Aries is trining my midheaven and conjuncting my Mercury in transit. So, and natally, my moon is squaring Aries. So, of course, my astrological innovation with Uranus basically applying to trine Aries, of course it will be Aries affiliated. And that's where indeed I talk about extortion cults. So of course I see Aries differently to astrologers that have to get a particular rank alongside the certification. Okay? Or study certification by those that had a particular rank alongside a certification and can't talk about or come from a lineage where they can't talk about, or simply not exposed to that facet because they're not in that particular rank and they haven't gotten through that hoop yet. Doesn't mean that in other aspects people don't have a lot of knowledge that I don't have. But this is exactly the point here. Venus trining Chiron and Aries is exactly tending and the wonderful conversation where the the disincluded, the the one that does not sit in the table with everyone, has the teaching. It doesn't mean that others are not competent. It definitely means that the structure of society, Saturn, has to change so that Venus is not in, so that Venus can be participating in a union that is not of assassination nature, Chiron and Jupiter. We can see a reverting to, okay, a particular pattern where everything tries to do the same old, trying to deprecate, trying to do mockery rituals, trying to portray the person as not knowledgeable, trying to, all these things that were done to women and or gay men. A lot of men that are gay and express, and their gender expression is either feminine or crosses as such, receive that same, whether they're being called soft or okay, receive that same treatment. In this in this square, they might even catch themselves giving that treatment. And and this particular flavor of square has to do with teaching, philosophy, confidence because of the vicinity of the sun, confidence at our voice, our teaching, our value. And there's something here that crosses certain structures and creates, particularly with the vicinity of Saturn and Neptune, creates a confrontation with the unconscious where people may have even automatic reactions, particularly if something has been long withstanding. If somebody had a smear campaign on a Venus, okay, around the COVID, there was the single white women. They were basically bashing trafficked women or women targeted for trafficking, for copycatting when there were ritual done on them, trying to harvest their creative energy. By both women, men and women, that now confront that in a crisis of originality. Okay, this is also where the trine to Chiron and Aries. And then we had Sedna with Beta per se, so the conjoining of witchcraft, trafficking, blaming a woman for being single, and then trying to traffic her, and then accusing her of being a single white woman, or basically accusing her of being a copycat. When the rituals were done to try to take a creative energy, even by women. Now, this is okay. Why even by women? Because these women of the old, whether regardless of their age, those women that went by the old ways that were funded by classified projects and MK often like projects, were funded to do rituals to harvest the energy of of the women that stood their value confidently, not succumbing to the humiliation rituals. And when I say women, I don't only mean cisgender women. I mean also cisgendered women. And this is where all those things fall flat. Just like everybody that told Ksenia Moore that her first relationship didn't work out because she did something so terrible in past life that it was display that she was punished by having relationships being delayed or being single for a long time. None of them had the word because If anything, it was about her standing in her own value and acknowledging her own value, whether being an astrologer, whether expressing herself artistically. And she, by the way, created the wheel that is used to teach astrology. Okay, there's also the craft. And and it wasn't none of those original teachings that had a lot of other good merited teachings, but not on the Venus Saturn. And none of those teachings could predict her actually having a happy marriage, not reliant on the old teachings that would get her literally nowhere. Because they would go the other way around from acknowledging her standards as a woman to love and be loved. Sorry, Ksenia, if I put you too much on the spotlight. Okay. Um, and this is where also for the Venusian, okay, on a relational level, any relationship should be supportive of our growth and expansion. So this is where we might meet both. Where are we not supportive of the growth of, or an expansion of another? And that can actually be remediated, but there can be a crisis or structural crisis around that. Or we can confront the truth of who actually only went so far when it comes to being able to be our counterpart as we grow into being our authentic self. Saturn here can create a limiting growth, and here the question is it gatekeeping, or is it actually a confrontation for Venus that that's not the counterpart to be in union with that is cohesive and true. That's not the counterpart that would support her on her growth journey and would honor her, particularly with Venus in Sagittarius, being an outspoken, free woman that is also spiritual, that also has teachings, that is safe and free. Venus here is confronted with the notion that to so-called being that freedom or even being the feminine or whatnot, the honoring of her Venusian, of her entirety as a Venusian, the cohesive truth of her own values, sensuality, freedom, philosophy, being an equal counterpart, when it's not honored, is just not the correct person. And anything that tries to criticize the Venusian here is receiving a return to itself, where they're being philosophically asked, well, had you honored women, wouldn't they be more beautiful around you? Wouldn't they be more radiant around you? Wouldn't they be more relaxed into their feminine self and sexy around you? Instead of trying to put it on the women all the time. And do you really want a woman who can bring out the lover in you, but also block you from being that lover and cause you to be an energy thief? Do you not have an authority over yourself? And if you don't, that makes women feel unsafe, which make them be less feminine with you. And they could have the best triangular face shape in the world. They would either scam you, incubus succubus, or treason you. And if that's all you know, then you're not comfortable standing in the face of a woman who isn't, because you don't know how to honor her erotic and non-erotic self, her philosophical and intellectual and values self. And that can have to do with a lot of internalized stuff about hierarchical structures and the self-deprecation and humiliation devices would be required of men by men, which is an invitation to look into those things. Um, but this is where Saturn falls flat, is where Saturn thinks, oh, this Venus does not have values because their values are not traditional. And underlying that is a taboo, because Saturn is ruling Pluto, that has to do with extortion codes and rape of children.